right, so welcome. This is planning for your IET road trip, real talk about SSLOs. So Kristine and I are here to share what we know and what we're learning about IETs and writing a single set of learning objectives. So I'm Patsy Egan and I direct Atlas. We're housed at Hamline University, although gosh, we don't spend much time there lately. We are still working remotely, most of us. And I am fairly new to the world of IET, but I've been learning a lot over the last couple of years. And yeah, I'm grateful to be joined on our road trip with Kristine.
Yes, hi, I'm Kristine Kelly, and I may not be somebody that people associate with the IET work, but I just love to get involved and learn about new things, and so I'm really happy. The team of people that I've been working with is tremendous, and really happy to have you all join here today. I think what would be ideal is if we were on a road trip, like to a warm location, like a tour
That would be
bus.
like a
And
van where
Patsy
we could
and
have
I were
like the
actually doing
IET
this
van.
session on,
Yeah.
with the microphone on the tour bus to a
Oh,
warm
I like that.
destination.
I
Yeah.
like that. Yeah. Okay. Maybe if people have ideas on destinations, they could put those in the chat box. But
Yes. So we're glad you are here. So quickly, our objectives for today. We're going to identify the 3 required components of an IET program. So some of you may have more experience than others, and so we want to make sure we're using the same language as we dive into the SSLOs. So we want to articulate the purpose of an SSLO, which is just a great acronym for single set of learning objectives, as well as means to creating them. Practice creating some sound SSLOs. So you're going to get an opportunity to wrestle a little bit with that. And then just always networking around additional IET topics, talking about the effectiveness of these SSLOs. We get a lot of questions about the role of standards here, and in Minnesota, of course, we have the CCRS and we have the wonderful TIF, the Transitions Integration Framework, and how to access further resources. There's a toolkit, there's upcoming PD. So we're going to try to talk about all of it today. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a Mentimeter poll. And so this is what you need to do. You can certainly do it if you want to, if you feel comfortable pulling up a tab, another tab on your computer. You can go to www.menti.com. If someone would put that into the chat box, that would be wonderful. And when you go to that link, you will enter the code on your screen. So you will enter the 4668582. It should prompt you for a code. And I am going to run 2 questions by you, and I'm going to change my screen here. So thank you, Patsy. So I'm going to change the slide, but the link to Menti and the code to get into this particular set of questions is in your chat box. So let me do this now. And I'm going to move a couple things around. And
can you double check that code for us, Kristine? Looks like some folks are having trouble.
oh, I wonder if it gave me a new code.
I bet.
This is what it says, 4784. I apologize. 4784 4588. Sorry, everyone. It did change the code on me. 4784 4588.
That's the hardest thing you'll do today. Thank you, everybody.
That is. So where are you with IET? 3 possible answers, just starting out, up and rolling, or what is that? I love Menti. I love using it with students. The real-time data is really fun for students to see. Okay, so all right. So we've got a mix of people. So we've got some knowledge and expertise here, and then we've got people who aren't sure what it is, which means this is also a really great session for you. One more question. And this is sorry, I need to go to my next All right. And what career cluster are you thinking about? Or if you're already doing some IETs, please indicate where those are. I think you can only pick one. Maybe some parapro, some manufacturing or other educational. Great. So we typically see healthcare is a very popular career cluster for IET, but we've got manufacturing, we've got a couple educational, one technical. All right, we've got a nice mix. So I am going to go back to the slide deck. Thank you very much for taking that poll so we can get a little bit of an idea of who's with us. So what is an IET? IET stands for Integrated Education and Training, and it is a model that is being used around the country in adult basic ed systems. And the purpose, it really distill it down to the purpose of an IET is to support learners' educational and career advancement. So that is really the core of what this work is. What is an IET? This is information that is just very concise, and I think really important for us to keep in mind that it is a service approach that provides adult education and literacy activities concurrently. That is a very key word, and contextually is the other key word, with workforce preparation activities and workforce training. In a specific occupation or occupational cluster. And again, that purpose of educational and career advancement. So these things are being done concurrently and contextually and in partnership. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So what are the components of an IET? And this comes out of the toolkit, the IET toolkit. There's adult ed and literacy. That is a component of the IET. There's workforce preparation. There's workforce training. And in order to have a strong IET, these activities need to be offered, each of them of sufficient intensity and quality. So we're not doing pretty much all of one thing and not very much of another component. Based on research, rigorous research, and with respect to reading, writing, mathematics, and English proficiency. So increasing student skills in those areas. These are simultaneously occurring within a scope of an IET program, and the materials are occupationally relevant. So that's the contextualized piece that students are working with the occupationally relevant instructional materials. The three required components, so we adapted this from Amy Dulcimer, who's done some great work with Minnesota on IETs. So to piece this out a little bit more, when we talk about adult education and literacy, we're talking about, of course, what we do. And adult education, literacy, numeracy, you don't have their English language, family literacy, English language, and civics preparation. So the parts that we provide. The workforce preparation, and you may recognize these as categories from one of our areas of standards in Minnesota: critical thinking, digital literacy, self-management, employability skills. So these soft professional skills that prepare our students for employment and also for training and post-secondary. And then we have the workforce training. So this includes occupational skills training or on-the-job training, incumbent worker training, pre-apprenticeship work, and customized employer-sponsored training. So that would be the training component of the IET program. So we've got these, and then we've got these pieces working together. Patsy is going to talk a little bit about the SSLOs, which are really a key part of planning and implementing a successful IET. So Patsy?
Yeah, thank you. So again, we'll say SSLO. What we're referring to is a single set of learning objectives. So if you're new to IET, which is Integrated Education and Training, and you see all these acronyms, like Kristine and I are newish to this work too. So just remind us if there's an acronym that you're not quite following, and we'll we'll try to spell it out because there are a lot of them in this work. We want to think about what the purpose is of this. So we're going to actually go about this via a metaphor because I'm me and I like me a metaphor. So my question, and please use the chat or raise your hand or somehow indicate, have you ever been on a family road trip? Kristine, have you ever been on a family road trip?
Oh goodness, so many with my parents, and I'm waiting to see who can trump my childhood road trip with my sister and my parents from San Carlos,
Uh-huh.
California to Utica, New York.
Oh my goodness, that is a long way. And I'm seeing a lot of people who have had some road trip experience there. Adam K says his whole life is a family road trip. I bet it is. Yup, Dan goes to Des Moines a lot. Dan's done quite a bit of traveling. So yeah, thank you so much. I'm glad because if no one had ever been on a road trip, my metaphor would flop. So it's going to be fine. I'm reassured here. Nova Scotia a couple years ago. That's a long one, Susan. Thank
That
goodness.
is long. That is good.
Russ has been to a bunch. Okay, good. So you're with me. Hang in there because it's going to get a little abstract and then it's going to totally make sense. And that's just how we're going to roll today. So the next question for you on the next slide is how was it all blissful? Look at these happy families. So yes or no? Is this how it rolled? Like everyone's smiling, the kids are not on their phones, they're joyfully playing cards in the back seat. Everyone is just so delighted to be together. So I'm seeing a little bit of yeah, before kids it was fine. Chelsea says, and I know you have little ones. Yeah, Russ, you're thinking of that movie perhaps. Yep. The
Always
vehicle
a
is never
meltdown.
big enough. Yep, there's always a
Mhm.
meltdown. Yep. So there's always some tough moments. I mean, certainly usually like, the first few blocks are fine, right? And then things get a little more interesting. Yeah, the vehicle with the table in the middle, that would have been handy in our road trips in our younger years. I grew up in Nebraska and we did a lot of driving across the country. My dad was a botanist and we went to the botany conference, wherever it was, every year. And it was all over the United States and Canada. So a lot of driving, of course, before phones and before all the tablets and such. So let's keep with this metaphor for a moment here. Here's my next question. Did you have like a pre-meeting as a family? So a kind of a little, hey, listen up, kids. We're going to be in this car together for like 10 hours and here's how it's going to go. Like, did that happen in your families? And I'm looking at this delightful family that's clearly, they've got charts, they've got easel paper, they've got notes, they're eating nutritious things, and they're thinking about that road trip and how it's going to go. So did that happen? Dad's way or the highway? Adam says, yep, good. Heather says no. Michelle, yes. Oh, good. I'm glad we have some variety here. Kristine, I'm wondering if the Kelly family did a pre-meeting with your car trips.
Well, it would have been the Barton family, and
Oh, yes.
because my mom is from upstate New York, we traveled frequently from the Twin Cities to upstate New York, and our we didn't really. The only pre-meeting that we had was my dad saying, "Get in the car." So I don't know if the rest of you had that lengthy pre-meeting, but it was okay. It's time. Get in the car.
Right, right. So, I mean, and that's probably one end of the continuum. And then we'll hang with this slide for a moment because I'm seeing that in the chat box. Some people did have pre-meetings. So in the chat box, what would be the purpose of such a meeting? And maybe those of you who actually did have them can tell us like what went down at that meeting. Was it, what were you talking about? Don't ask when we're going to get there. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Right. So talking about the destination, what else? What was, set some expectations, Michelle says. Yeah. Yep, I'm seeing that a couple of times. What else? Planning activities, meals, and locations. What are we going to bring? Yeah, good. What to pack? How long will it take? A little like, so you kind of know what to expect, what's going to happen. What do you need to have with you? Who's going to be the map person? Yeah, maybe setting some roles, like who's going to do what. How many times can you watch Frozen? Thank you, Chelsea. I feel for you. We're not going to stop unless you really need to go to the bathroom, right? So some things that come to mind for me that I'm seeing in the chat here. So establishing shared expectations, clarifying roles for family members, like maybe a map person and someone who's in charge of supplies or what have you, first aid, whatever. Considering possible obstacles and how you're going to tackle them, like, okay, what happens if this bridge is closed, or I don't know what might come up. Determine like any special needs or interests, like maybe so and so really needs to get photographs of a certain thing for a school project. I know that came up with my brother now and again. It's like, oh, Rich needs to collect so and some like thing while we're out there, so like let's just be sure and we prioritize that. Or so and so definitely needs to stop a little more often because they have a leg cramp or something. So okay, we'll just kind of know that. And then think about, sounds like, how we're going to be together. Like, how are we going to be together in this car like for this long? And maybe come up with some guidelines like Russ suggested, like how often are we going to stop? Maybe like no movies before noon, maybe limiting the number of times we can watch Frozen 2, no name calling, whatever it is, right? And those I want to just kind of like hold in our heads, like sharing expectations, establishing roles, considering obstacles, thinking about special needs and interests, and just kind of deciding how we're going to show up and be together, right? All right, let's hit that next slide. So yes, like to all those things, right? And ultimately, the idea is to arrive at your destination safely and hopefully still liking each other, and to not find Wally World closed. So at this point in the presentation, it's important to me to know how many of you understand that reference, because Kristine and I realized that we are dating ourselves. That is referring to a movie that came out in 1983. So how many of you really know what I'm referring to with Wally World? Oh, good. Okay. I'm hoping it transcends time, but oh, good. I'm so glad. So if you don't, there was a movie in 1983, National Lampoon's Vacation, starring the lovely people in this car here, who drove across the country, had various adventures, only to find that the amusement park they were going to, was closed. So that's unfortunate. It is a classic. I'm sure you can stream it somewhere. I'm not sure you should, but just so you know that it is available. There were, I guess, several in the whole franchise. So we're going to now take that lovely image and that metaphor and think about it as in terms of IET. So bear with me. We are thinking about, like, perhaps there are two adults in the car, the ABE person, that's you, and a training partner, some career person who knows the career or the job that you're training for together. You guys need a shared vision for the road trip, right? If the two adults in the car aren't on the same page about where you're going, that's going to be a problem. And then think about, like, in the back seat are some passengers, right? And those are your career, workplace, and ABE content that you're teaching, the language literacy and math, and then the specific job related skills, and then the employability skills that everyone needs. And then everyone needs to get to Wally World intact and have a good time and learn some stuff, right? So how do we pre-plan so everyone gets what they need, right? And that pre-trip planning is the single set of learning objectives when it comes to integrated education and training. So hopefully you're seeing the metaphor here. All right, I'm going to let Kristine talk us through the slow compromises.
Yes, I would just like to point out that Patsy, of course, gets the metaphor National Lampoon's Christmas or National Lampoon Vacation fun slides.
I get the fun slide.
Yes, you do. But
well, someone
actually,
has to bring the fun.
because I never bring the fun. No. But there are some definite nuts and bolts here. And personally, for somebody who is relatively newer to the IET work, I found this a really useful metaphor because in the end, everything has to work together in order to, come out with a desired outcome. And so the SSLO comprises all the individual integrated learning objectives. So the adult ed and literacy activities, the workforce training activities, and the workforce preparation activities. And the thing that we've noticed about SSLOs is they can be a little tricky, but if you are very, very clear on your plans for what you hope to do, and you can identify the specific adult education content that students need to support them with a particular occupational competency. You think about the workforce preparation activities and the workforce training competencies and what students are going to need to do to demonstrate and what skills they're going to need to demonstrate these competencies. Then you can get to your SSLOs and cooperatively. That's the key here, is cooperatively. So a great visual from the toolkit is the function. You have your IET program goals, and those goals set the stage for your SSLO, or your single set of learning outcomes. And the single set of learning outcomes informs the skills and competencies for the three components, as we talked about: the adult education literacy, the workforce, workplace. And then the skills and competencies frame the integrated curricula. So once you have your goals, you have clear, measurable learning objectives, and you know what students need to learn and what they need to demonstrate, then you can build out your curriculum with your units, lessons, and activities more easily, and keep nice alignment between all of your parts. So when we talk about effective SSLOs, we talk about how an SSLO needs to clearly articulate what learners will know and be able to do. Well, we're educators. We do this all the time. We think of lesson objectives, learning targets for students. We work with this. So clearly articulate what learners will know and be able to do after successful completion of the IET program. An effective SSLO ensures that the instructional content is aligned with those three required components of an IET program. And really, these effective SSLOs help guide the development of the contextualized lesson plans, units, all the activities that students are going to need to do. So there's work on the front end, but it pays off because it should guide things. And again, should get you to the amusement park that's actually open and not closed. So I love how Patsy considers this the learning objective mashup. So this too is from the toolkit, which we will share with you. And this helps to piece out before, as you're thinking about writing an SSLO, piecing out and making sure that you are combining the important pieces into that learning objective. So looking at listing out those workforce training skills and competencies, and then thinking about what of the adult education content standards. In this case, we're thinking about the college and career readiness standards, whether they're math, whether they're English language arts, adult education literacy skills and competencies. And we're going to show you some examples of these. And then the workforce preparation skills and competencies. And we think of this in terms of the TIF, the Transitions Integration Framework, and the 6 categories of TIF skills. So it's a mashup. So it's basically thinking about these areas and then synthesizing them into a very clearly articulated learning objective. So here is a great example. This is from an actual IET work here in Minnesota. It's a part of Parapro, and the workforce training skill is being able to give clear verbal instructions. And so when we think about those content standards and we think about what of the CCRS standards is a good match, and you don't have to be exhaustive. It's not about naming as many as possible. It's really finding those key standards. In this case, the ability to sequence ideas logically and speak clearly at an understandable pace. That's speaking and listening anchor 5. C would be the level targeted. And the other one is a language anchor. It's about being able to choose that language to convey precise ideas and really be able to differentiate the context when more formal or when more informal English is needed, and this formal or informal discourse. So the literacy skills, the adult education literacy skills and competencies, if we really distill those down, that in order to give clear verbal instructions, someone should be able to organize and present steps logically. So there's some chronological order knowledge needed there, precise language to be able to convey that information exactly as it needs to be heard, and to adapt speech to audience. So in the case of someone in parapro, they may be adapting to children. They may be adapting to older students. They may be adapting to other teachers. They may be adapting to parents. The workforce preparation skills and competencies, when we dive into the TIF, we can find under effective communication and critical thinking 2 skills and sub-skills that really connect to this. So like the adult education content standards, the language anchor, choosing appropriate register for audience purpose and communication type. This is really that soft professional TIF skill that we're talking about here. And then also the idea of sequencing components, in this case, ideas for instructions in a logical or structured manner so they can be easily followed. So this is piecing out. If the workforce competency that a student in a parapro program needs to demonstrate is giving clear verbal instructions, what will that student need? And how do we integrate the content standards that we have for adult education into building that skill so that the student can demonstrate? Patsy, would you add anything to that?
No, I think you've captured it. I would just point out, these 4 headings you will get familiar with. These are things that we'll continue to work with through. Actually, go back 1 slide just so people can see them larger, maybe like workforce training, the content standard, which really we're referring to as CCRS here. And then the literacy skills teases out what is the skill exactly, like what is it you're going to have to be able to do, and then the workforce preparation, which you can kind of boil down to things that you might find in the ACES TIF. So yeah, just wanted to point out those headings before you give the big reveal. Go ahead with the mashup there.
The big reveal, and this is an example of a mashup.
Ooh,
So this might be the combined learning objective. Converse with and give verbal instructions to school-age children. I believe this was more geared towards giving clear instructions to children, this particular skill. Converse with and give verbal instructions to school-age children in clear, developmentally appropriate ways. So again, it's really the synthesis of all of this, and giving those verbal instructions, communicating with children in ways that are clear, so that it's well organized, the choice of language, the register is appropriate for the age of the child, and it's the mashup, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be something that is really, really long. It is really just synthesizing it into a very clear learning objective of what a student should be able to do.
And before you move on, I just want to point out, sometimes we've seen examples of learning objectives that programs have created that try to put everything into the learning objective. Like the learning objective will not incorporate every single piece of all 4 categories, right? It can't possibly do that. So, but like, what are the essentials? Like, what is, if you boil it down, like what is the essence of what needs to be conveyed that pulls from each of those 4 categories? And this is hard. Like this is mental gymnastics for sure. And so we've gotten a little bit better at it as we've gotten some more practice, but it's not intuitive. So if it seems hard, it's because it is. That's all I would want to add there.
Yeah, thank you, Patsy. It's not intuitive, although, like other things, it becomes easier once we internalize some of these pieces and we start kind of looking through that lens. So, but we're gonna take a look here at another learning objective, and I am going to pull out my formatting tools here. So what we have is demonstrate how healthcare workers can effectively adapt their communication to a variety of contexts and tasks with their clients and team members. So we definitely have the context here, right? We have the healthcare workers. We're talking about clients and team members. So that is really the workplace context. When we talk about the content standards, we really can get into effectively adapting their communication. I believe that might be language right out of the speaking and listening standard 6 to a variety of contexts. When we look at the preparation skills and competencies, where the last column where we look at the TIF, again, we look at effective communication. We could include sub-skills A, B, and C, because of adapting communication might involve body language, understanding register, understanding how best to communicate to a particular audience. And so that is definitely part of effective communication skills. And the literacy skills and competencies we have here. Hold on a second. I want to move something here. So we think about the pieces, again, that may have come before this, adapting communication. So that's understanding and being able to pay attention to more informal or formal language, adapting communication, choosing precise language. And again, being able to communicate in a way that's clearly organized for the listener. And we don't have to include those in the actual synthesized learning objective, but we can see how they're implied here. So we have the context, we have the CCRS standards, or standard in this case, we have the ACEs, TIF, effective communication skills built in. And as Patsy said, it is not easy work, in fact, but there's a little wordsmithing. But to go back, if I were to go back here, and I'm going to stop annotating. If we go back, it really is important to tease these pieces out. And that's why it's not meant to cause more work. It's meant to really slow down and think about the multiple pieces here. And then having those, what you produce from it will likely be much more comprehensive. So let's take a look at maybe some not so effective SSLOs. And Patsy's going to help me a little bit with this, but we really want to hear from you. You can use the chat box. And actually, I will do this first one, and then I'm going to have Patsy use her lovely voice. Students will become ServSafe certified and prepared to work in a restaurant. So why might this not be a completely effective SSLO?
Yeah, so use your chat box or feel free to unmute. Like, what's not great about that objective as a overall objective for IET program? Certainly, we want people to get their ServSafe certification, but what is it not doing for us? Heather, thank you, and Jean. It doesn't identify the skills that need to be prepared. Yeah, Heather says something similar. Yeah, Dan skips right to the end. Exactly, right? It's way too broad, Adam. I agree. Yeah, I mean, sure, we want people to be prepared to work in a restaurant. That's why they've come to this class. But like, it doesn't help us decide what to teach, right? So it's like saying in your pre-meeting, the goal of our road trip is to get there. It's like, well, yeah, but that doesn't help us to do that actually, right?
Right. And what's interesting to me is it's not only broad, but it's an example of just trying to we've got two kind of separate pieces here, the ServSafe certification, and then being prepared to work in a restaurant, which is going to include additional skills, likely, especially some of those, I think about my friend who teaches in the culinary arts program at Hennepin Tech. They do a lot of work with those soft professional skills and team building and learning how to communicate with the head chef and, these different dynamics and things. And there's really two things going on here in perhaps some more detail. Patsy, you want to take us through the
the
next?
question of what is the serve safe? Heather Turngren, if you're there and want to just chime in, I know you teach this, but my understanding is that it's the certification required to work with food. Is that right, Heather?
Yes, and for this, there's many different serve safe tests. It's a brand name, but for most restaurants, you need to have someone on site who has a serve safe manager license certificate issued from the state.
Great, thank you so
That
much.
helps.
Yeah, so Heather has learned all of the things about disinfecting cutting boards and hand washing and all of that, I'm sure. So let's look at the second one. Letter B, effectively complete the steps needed to enter into a selected pathway. What's wrong with that, I guess, is the general question. Effectively complete the steps needed to enter the selected career pathway. What do you think? Yeah, so exactly, Danny, what steps, right? Like, we don't know what they are. It's very much similar to the first one, right? It's just way too vague. Exactly. Great, thanks. So in contrast, let's take a look at, and it doesn't mention which pathway, great point, Dan. So the third one, if I may, Kristine, I'll just read that one for us
Yes.
here, is students will be able to visually examine their work and that of others for discontinuities and defects, including cut surfaces and edges of prepared base metal parts, examining tacks, root passes, intermediate layers, and completed welds. This one is for welding, if you didn't gather already, although there's a few words I don't really understand. But so again, like taking a look, what's going on here that isn't going to help us get to our destination? And it's okay if you don't know anything about welding. You know about teaching. So what is not helpful about having this as a learning objective? Yeah, how do you measure, visually examine? Yeah, how do you decide if they've passed that? They've looked at it, go team, right? We don't know if it's not measurable, exactly. It's very detailed, exactly, Michelle, but we're not sure where it goes, right? And what I'm seeing, and perhaps some of you are noticing as well, is that it gives a great deal of career specific, like the job specific information, which is one of the 4 columns. But exactly, Dan, it doesn't talk about the work, like the skills required for the ABE work side of it. Like, what's the literacy involved? Like, I can imagine that there's going to be some math involved with this, right? Or there's going to be some literacy involved, or how do you report a defect, or do you have to write that up in something, right? So there's more going on here that needs to be outlined. That in order for it to be a mashup, because right now it seems to be pulling heavily from just the one column, which of course is the job specific objective, which of course students need to learn. We're not saying they don't, but as far as a combined learning objective for the purposes of an IET in this partnership of an ABE instructor and a career focused instructor, they need to have a more mutual understanding. The literacy instructor may not be able to do anything with this objective, right? But the career person would need to connect with them and think about what the literacy and academic language and employability pieces to this as well. All right,
I can't help but look at this, and when I did my vocabulary session this morning and talking about words with multiple meanings, I'm looking at the word root here and realizing I have no idea what root means.
Not in this context. Nope. Maybe somebody does and can tell us.
So let's take it slow. That's all Patsy right
we
there.
do like
I'm
a
not,
wordplay at Atlas.
so if you want to throw tomatoes at the screen, aim them for Patsy's face.
Metaphors and wordplays. That's all me. Sorry, friends.
Patsy, do we want to split these up?
Sure. So I'll start. The first step, and these are directly taken from the toolkit, which is we dropped into your, thanks, Marisa. We did drop that into the participant folder. It's also on the Atlas website. It's a federally issued toolkit, but it's big and kind of heavy if you were to hold it physically. So we thought we'd distill the steps for you here. The first step to creating an SSLO, at least in one approach that we advocate, is to identify what are the workforce training skills. So not unlike the welding piece, right? Like, what is it you're going to have to be able to do on the job. Like that's an important thing to identify. So I've highlighted the words workforce training and occupational. Like what is the job specific thing that students are going to be able to and need to be able to do? So step one, start with that. And then step two, Kristine? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so step 2 is to identify the state adult education standards to align with the occupational training skills and competencies. And of course, we have our 3 content areas, the standards, the North Star, digital literacy standards, the TIF, the ACES TIF, and then the CCRS. So we're really talking about the CCRS here and what is going to align. So what are the adult education literacy skills needed to accomplish this this integrated learning objective? So we're looking at some specific CCRS standards, really the key ones that are going to address skills gaps, particularly in literacy and numeracy, and will support mastery of the occupational training content, and then determine the academic literacy skills and competencies that are needed to complete the course and transition on to the next step. And this C is really important. Do not try to make skills fit that are not applicable. There isn't a requirement of there must be 10 CCRS standards associated with this one learning objective. We want to really pick the key the key standards that support this work. So it isn't a matter of listing everything you can. So keep that in mind as well. We're looking for the key pieces. Patsy will talk about 3.
Yeah, so then we want to think about the workforce preparation, the employability piece, kind of those hard to define and make or break skills. And really what we're talking about here, as far as Minnesota practitioners, is the TIF. Like what's in the TIF? And I guess I would include the digital literacy as well, of course, but like the TIF skills, those are critical thinking skills, navigating systems, effective communication, learning strategies, all of those things that we know are in the TIF. And if you're not familiar with the TIF, of course, you can find it on the Atlas website. And there's all sorts of resources available to help you learn more. But what are the related, and this is key, transferable skills and competencies that adult learners can apply in a variety of contexts? So I'm just thinking about that welding example. Like, I don't know what a root pass is, but I'm fairly confident it's only used in welding. Like, I don't know that, but I guess I'm guessing that. Like, it's not transferable, perhaps, to a wide variety of professions. As an educator, I don't need to know what that is. As a healthcare worker, perhaps I don't need to know what that is. As someone working in another industry. So we want to think about what are the transferable employability skills here, and then you're going to be thinking about.
Yeah, and I was going to say, when I think about in that case, in the welding case for the related transferable skills and competencies, I think about problem solving skills, the ability to recognize the problem steps in solving a problem, being able to evaluate if the problem was solved. That's a TIF skill. That is a transferable skill that can be applied to different contexts, in addition to, of course, the welding context. Absolutely. Step 4 is to develop these individual high-level performance outcome statements that, when combined, this set of 5 or 3 or 10 is your single set of learning objectives. So the key question here is, what do learners need to be able to do to demonstrate competency? And we do know that many of the career pathways that our students choose have some kind of a licensing or certification test. ServSafe is just a perfect example of that. So you want to work with your training partner, whether that is wherever that might be, the local college, other training partner. You're going to develop this set of measurable performance outcomes. And again, we're educators, and it's not the first time. Hold on one. Will you finish this, Patsy?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It wouldn't be a webinar without Kristine's dogs making an entrance. So yeah, we want to be sure that, are you back?
I am back. I'm sorry. My female Scotty had something to add about step 4, but it's not really going to be useful. So as I was going to say, we've been around the block, right? Your performance objectives. We need the conditions under which, how will the learner, what is the condition that the learner will need to demonstrate competency? What will the student actually do using action verbs? And how are we going to measure that objective was actually achieved? So we want to be very specific. And again, going back to the visibly seeing, or the, students will understand, or I personally often try to slide understand in, which is not an action verb for a performance objective. Last step.
Right. So that's the mashup in step 4. And then on step 5, you want to be sure it all aligns, right? You take a moment, you don't just write it and leave it. Like we write it and then we think, all right, does it actually align with the program level goals and outcomes? Or is this IET doing what we hope it will do? Are students actually able to then get work, and are they adequately prepared for said work? Do they have what they need? So you'll map that SSLO onto whatever program level learner goals and outcomes you have, identify what's not being supported by this single set of learning objectives. And then if it's not being supported, then you'll tweak, right? You'll keep working with it. So the key question, are all the program level goals you created in the design and plan phase adequately represented in the SSLO? And I assure you this will all make more sense when we actually dig into some. We wanted to give you this pre-meeting here.
So I'm going to have Patsy will, why don't you take us into the breakout rooms? I will just say we're going to have an opportunity to take a look at least one like set of those 4 categories where we've spelled some things out. You're actually going to work in some small groups to synthesize that information to create an SSLO.
Exactly. And so slow and steady wins the race here. You're only going to take a look at one, and then there's a bonus one. If you have nothing else to say about that one, you're welcome to look at the second one. We've pulled from 2 different careers. Actually, do you want to open up that note-taking doc so people can see? And Marisa, if you can drop the doc in the chat so people can get that open. So what you'll see here is in breakout groups, and you'll need to take note of which breakout you're in. And actually, if you open up the table of contents over on the side so people can see how they navigate to the different breakout groups, and you'll know which one you're in just by looking once we put you in groups. Yeah, go ahead and close that so we can see the full screen now. Thanks. So you'll see that there are 4 categories of the objectives that need to be created. And those are the same as you would find in the toolkit and the same that we showed in our examples: the workforce training skills, adult education standard, the adult education literacy skills and competencies, and then the workforce prep. And then there's a blank column, scroll up just a smidge there, with the little like yellowish color, and that's where you'll put your combined learning objectives. So you are the mashupper, right? You get to take a look at these 4 categories and don't try to get everything in there, but get the essence, right, of what needs to happen in order to synthesize those 4 things into one combined learning example objective. So this is a parapro example, and that's again for people being prepared to work in schools as teaching assistants. And then the bonus example is a manufacturing one. We wanted to give you from a couple of different career clusters. And then as you scroll down it's exactly the same, but just for the different breakouts. So you'll breakout 2, you'll go here, and everyone should have editing rights. You can all get in here and work together and type away. Let me see if Marisa's ready to put you in groups.
Yep, we are ready. And so you'll have, as Patsy said, 13 minutes plus a 2-minute countdown. When you see that 13 minutes is up, that doesn't mean that you have to leave. It's just giving you a 2-minute countdown, letting you know you've got 2 minutes to wrap up your conversations.
Great. And are there any questions before she opens those rooms? Let us know. So we'll just take a minute to see what you came up with. There were just 3 groups, so it shouldn't take too long, and we'll just go through the first one. I don't think I saw anyone going to the bonus example. So let's start with breakout group 1, and I'm going to ask for some brave soul from that group. I didn't take note of who was in that group, so somebody's going to just have to speak up. Maybe the person who took notes wouldn't mind just telling us what you came up with.
I was in group 1.
Great, thanks, Dan.
And we tried to make an assumption on what this skill is about for parapro, and it might be talking about school or institutional policies And if any conflicts come up, being able to refer back to the policies and being able to communicate those back to people
Great.
in an effective way. So we said be able to communicate the enforcement of policies through speaking and writing, and then citing evidence to support them.
Well, looks really great. Thank you. And I'm just curious, how did this go? Like, was this hard? Like, what's your impression, Dan, or anyone else from that group?
Yeah. Yeah, it was difficult. Yeah.
It's
There's
hard.
just there's a lot there too.
Yeah.
So we started out by just highlighting what we thought were keywords, and
yeah, I think that's a great way to do it. I see the words you've highlighted there. That makes a lot of sense to me to just start with, like, okay, what are the keywords that we need to include? Nice job, group one. All right, thank you. All right, group two, maybe you've been silently pointing at each other to decide who's going to speak. Looks like Michelle, Chelsea, Mayo, Danny, Amanda, Sarah. All right, who's brave? Someone from group two. Mayo, you've been voluntold. How's that? If you don't mind.
Boy, they picked the wrong volunteer on this one. We had a really hard time getting started.
Okay.
And just we're kind of struggling with all the different, trying to put the objectives into, into this some concise manner. So we were I think we were floating around and then kind of grasping at straws. So as you can see,
yeah,
the first, so I don't know if you want me just to read these or just.
Sure, go ahead.
So the first part, students will be able to understand privacy rights and then we were through reading, identifying main ideas and synthesizing information. I think we were going back and forth when we were writing these, trying to figure out just exactly what we're pointing at, and the text, understanding text and explaining. Wow, I can't even read. We've got producing clear writing, citing evidence from texts, and identifying, and I have to go to the next page, identifying main idea. I think we went down, and demonstrating understanding of student privacy rights, and writing.
Okay.
Boy, I can't even, sorry about that.
There is a lot happening there, isn't there?
Yeah, it was a jumble.
I think you did a great job here. The only thing I might add is students will be able to demonstrate Patsy, can you scroll up? Understanding of student privacy rights laws through reading for main ideas, synthesizing information, and citing evidence, or I think you did a pretty great job here.
I think we were trying to just throw, just grab tidbits of each one of those and try to come up with conceptually how they could all go together. So
right, and sometimes it's a bit of a drafting process. Like maybe you take what you wrote, which is a little lengthy, and then next time you distill it a little bit more and a little bit more. So yeah, I think you're in the
nice
right
work.
there.
I think you did a great job.
You're too kind.
All right,
I'm one of those people though that if I didn't think
Kristine.
you did. If I didn't think you did, I just wouldn't say anything at all. I would have stayed silent.
All right, well, we're a little crunched for time because we have a very important video to show you. So let's go ahead and see if group three can just tell us what you got. Russ, go ahead.
Well, Heather asked me to do this, and I'm the least likely to do it because I was kind of hiding out in the vehicle by the spare tire. So, but anyway.
Important role nonetheless.
Well, yeah. It, by the way, is fully inflated, so we're good to go. Anyway, the group struggled with this. I in particular, because I'm not as familiar as the group is with all CCRS, et cetera, but what they came up with was students will be able to identify the main ideas from a document on policies of privacy rights in order to summarize with cited evidence. And then there was this comment up top, we need to identify privacy rights, define the level of privacy. There was some talk about that, and that with different Department of Corrections, with the audience, there are certain audience members that have a whole different set of privacy rights, as do people who are working with them, et cetera, et
Mhm.
cetera. That's what I
Mhm.
recall anyway.
Yeah.
So I'd open it back up to the group, but they did a good job. I just was the cheerleader, right?
Well, thank you. And thanks
Yeah.
for stepping up to speak out a little bit about it. So
Thanks,
yeah,
sir. I'm really happy with these.
yeah,
Yeah.
this is not easy. So, and I think, 15 minutes to write an objective is not a lot of time, but you did it, right? And you do have to decide what to include and what not to. And sometimes it's like, oh, I hate not to include that, but maybe it doesn't mean you're not going to do it in your course, right? So that's just another thing to remember. All right, we need to move along. I'm actually going to let Kristine share the slides because you've got them up, and be sure to share your sound.
Okay.
And then we have a handful of very important announcements and then a very important video, and then we will let you get to your next.
Patsy's
session.
very, very, very excited about this. So,
Am I?
okay. So we want to watch the video.
Well, let's go to the other things first here. Hold
Okay.
on.
Here we
can
go.
back a step. So we have the IET toolkit that Marisa will drop in the chat, as well as a webinar coming up on February 3rd. So that's important to know. We will be digging in with Heather's help. We'll be digging into the toolkit even more, and you can register for that. And then the toolkit, I put it in the participant folder. It's also available on our website. And then another save the date is April 28th. So on the next slide, you'll see there is a half-day virtual institute around integrated education and training. Be sure to mark your calendars, and you can go ahead and register for that. Not a lot of details yet, it's forthcoming, but be sure and have that on your calendars and join us for that. It's going to be good for people who are both new to IET and working to strengthen a current IET. And then we just have a really important wish for you, and that is that you arrive at your IET destination successfully, and that your Wally world is always open and your passengers happy and healthy. So we're going to end the session with this. Go ahead, Kristine.
Yes, good SSLOs will prevent the following.
Exactly.
Maybe.
First one's here. First one's here.
But we're so far away, John.
Right. And at the end of the day, when the lot's all full and everybody's fighting to get out of here, we'll be the first ones out too, right? Why? Because we're the Griswolds. You want to race it?
And just to make you feel old, that young man is Anthony Michael Hall. He is now 53.
Thanks, Patsy, for that.
Well, we know the sound isn't great. You've probably all seen this, though. So Kristine, we're actually not hearing it very well, so I imagine we could probably stop it at that point. But anyway, point being, be sure to get to your destination safely and make sure Wally World's open.
I'm sorry that my volume wasn't turned up enough. But it's more of a visual.
It is. Yeah. Go ahead and stop sharing. And if people would like to turn their cameras on for a moment as we say goodbye, we have this next session begins at 2:30. Yay, people. Hi, people.
Oops.
Nice to see you. Thanks to our MBE colleagues for being here too, Brad and Astrid, as well as so many members of our Adult Career Pathways team were able to join us. So thanks for being part of this. You have an array of wonderful things to choose from at 2:30. So take a little break and we'll see you at the next one. Thanks to Marisa for all her work behind the scenes too. You can stop the recording.